Oh, great. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation on connecting to create. This is where we explore how great work relationships really help people to be at their very best in organizations and in teams. So before we dive into the content, can I get you to do a little bit of an exercise? Would you imagine with me a place where ideas flow, where risks are embraced, and where every challenge is met with collective genius? For some of you, it might be far-fetched. For some of you, well, yes. But that is the beauty of imagination, right? I mean, athletes do this all the time. They imagine what they want to see, what they want to manifest in their reality. Try to imagine, why is it that some teams seem able to tackle, everything they tackle, they seem to have some success, while some teams struggle to muster that creative spark? What is going on there? Is it individual intelligence, or is it collective intelligence that is the game changer in those situations? Any thoughts from your own personal experience? Have you worked with teams that seem really creative, seem able to, the ideas flow?
Yes.
What's going on there? What's the culture like? What's the team dynamic? If you were a fly on the wall, what would you see?
I think some of the teams that I have that have had that have been psychologically safe, and they trust each other.
Yeah.
So, and there's no fear of consequence when you speak to somebody.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Thank you.
No fear of consequence when you speak to somebody and come up with an idea, and if another person says, "Oh, well, actually, I don't agree with that," or "I don't like it," there's no argument with that.
Yeah.
It's, well, let's have a conversation and let's see what that means.
Yeah.
There's no dismissive.
Yeah.
Go away, I'm not speaking to you, you're talking nonsense type of effect. But I think that all comes down to psychological safety, definitely interest.
Definitely. So what I'm hearing is not only is there safety where people trust themselves, the trust enables them to communicate, it enables them to challenge each other. And that is really, what we are trying to show here. And when I was doing this presentation, what really came strongly to me is a South African word called Ubuntu. Have any of you heard that word? Wonderful. And this is a word that was taught me by a colleague of mine. You know him, Nana. Yeah, he taught me. And he said that what it means is that, what I am is a function of who you are. So I am because you are. And this speaks to me very much about how those interactions that are wholesome, are really what is helping people in organizations to be their very best. That trust, that psychological safety, and the fact that in the context of those interactions, they are able to find expression for their skill sets. Now, I think this is really important because most of us, because we're in a sort of rat race, believe we are just a job mix. We're just a skills mix, we're just a job function. And what I hope to show through this presentation is that we're more than this, and that what we bring to organizations is more than what we have on our CV, and that together we are more than the sum of our parts. So, how does Ubuntu find its expression in organizations? A study was done not too long ago where two professors from two universities, they put students into two groups. One group was a group of students who are just acquaintances. The other was a group of students who really knew themselves well. They gave them tasks to do. The tasks were collaborative tasks. They were decision-making, two tasks, decision-making, and then building, a building project. And the outcome of that project was that the people who knew themselves really well were the ones who outperformed. Can anybody work out why that happened?
think?
Familiarity, right?
Familiar also with their strengths and weaknesses.
They were familiar with their strengths and weaknesses. Awesome. And that's exactly what happened. The trust was there. They communicated better. The people who knew themselves really well communicated better. They were able to challenge themselves, just like Shelby said. They weren't afraid to say, hey, you are making a mistake. Let's do it this way. But the acquaintances, on the other hand, tended to work in silos, right? And only really looked out or asked for help when they found themselves having a problem. So what this tells me is that being safe, being able to express yourself, having that respect, having that understanding, having that permission to really express your skill set in your given role is what is really, really important. And that Ubuntu is really showcased here in terms of the actual interactions is what is really facilitating that effectiveness. Now, the studies show that there is a reason why that happens. When you are safe, and I think the last speaker, I'm really gutted I couldn't, be around for the last speaker. But what the studies show is that in places where people feel safe, they secrete, dopamine, which is what they secrete once they successfully deliver a project. They secrete oxytocin, which helps them to really collaborate, and which is really important in today's business context. When people are stressed, what happens is that they tend to, miscommunicate, they tend to misread cues, and then they tend to make more mistakes as well. The research shows that they also become sick because their immune system is suppressed as well. And so what the studies show is that those interactions, actually, there's a neuroscience to why, we find ourselves being much more effective when we feel respected, when we feel safe, and when we feel we have permission to do what we are skilled to do. And ultimately, that leads to more satisfied customers, less mistakes as well as an enjoyable place to work. So a chap called Ron Friedman did a lot of work in this area about how workplace relationships can help people to be at their very best. And I would really recommend his book. He's an award-winning author, and his book has been, he's received quite a few accolades from some really well-known figures like Dan Pink, who wrote about motivation. So, yes, I would heartily recommend that to you. So I think it's safe to say that we all want to maximize our creative imagination, regardless of whether we're leaders, regardless of whether we're on the delivery side, regardless of whether we're project managers, whoever we are within our organization, whether it's our own creative imagination, unleashing that, or you're really supporting our teams to unleash their creative imagination. And would it surprise you to know that the World Economic Forum, a not-for-profit think tank, also believes that organizations that are going to unleash their creative imagination need to nurture a culture that helps them to do that, and that they can't achieve innovation without nurturing that culture. Now, management literature tells us that psychological safety is quite key, and Shelby mentioned that. And psychological safety as a phenomenon has been gathering a lot of interest over the last couple of decades, and the literature shows that organizations that learn fast and can that learning enables them to respond to their business context, they tend to have psychological safety. What the World Economic Forum says also is that teams today require a mixture of social and technical skills. So, and the social skills that they say that we need, are leadership, emotional regulation. And what that suggests to me is that emotional intelligence is a vehicle through which psychological safety is nurtured, and that those that nurture their emotional intelligence increase their capacity to facilitate psychological safety. Now, even though the literature says that leaders are set the tone for culture, what I hope that we can get from this presentation is that we all have a part to play in that. And we can see that from the very first experiment that is the case. So this is a little bit about me. Been around the block. Last 10 years, I've been operating as an enterprise coach and also as an executive coach in the last 5 years. So the thing that really means a lot to me is really seeing people and teams and organizations maximizing their creative potential. I'm also studying for a research degree, hence my love for, experiments, for empirical evidence of things rather than just sound bites that you sometimes see in management literature. So what I hope that we will achieve today is just to really revisit. I know some of us are acquainted with psychological safety and its importance in driving organisational learning and performance, but I hope we'll forge a deeper link between emotional intelligence and psychological safety, and see that we have a lot more agency in developing or supporting our teams and the leaders that we work with to operate in psychologically safe ways. So, what makes a great team? And that is something that Ron Friedman has been really focused on, but he has been looking at it from the point of motivation and self-determination. Google, and many of you are acquainted with Google and perhaps with the research that they did to look at what are some of the top attributes that are seen in top teams. And what they found out was that 5 of these attributes were present in the top teams. But without psychological safety, none of those attributes were effective in making them highly performing. The other thing they found out was that it wasn't the who. So it didn't matter the personality type, whether they were extrovert or introvert. It didn't even matter what their background was, whether it was similar, whether it was different. Their age profile didn't really matter. It was how they worked together. And what they found in the top teams is that many of them tended to know themselves outside of work, right? They tended to socialize outside of work. So you've probably heard people say, I don't come to work to make friends, right? And there is truth to that, in that can't be your primary reason. But, studies are showing increasingly that, being comfortable with the people that you work is really, really important. In another similar study, that was done with around 700 participants. 3 different universities came together to put 700 participants within small groups and gave them a series of tasks, much like what Pratik and Daniel, those kind of, things that really get the creative juices going and involve collaboration, involve communication. They put them into small groups. And what they found is that the teams that did really well on one assignment tended to do well on other assignments. Now, they didn't hypothesize why, but it is potentially possible that the dopamine hit from doing one, really achieving, the first assignment was really, and the trust that they built as they began to understand the weaknesses and strengths of each other was a feature. But what they did notice was that the teams where the people, everyone, was engaged were the ones who did the best, right? So where you had a vocal minority, those teams didn't do too well. The other thing they found out was that the teams where members had greater social sensitivity, i.e. they had empathy. They understood when somebody wasn't contributing or somebody wasn't feeling really well, and they did something about it. And so that for me was, a real game changer in my understanding of how, emotional intelligence, the awareness, the ability to regulate, social intelligence, being aware of the dynamic in the team, and then being ready to sort of manage those relationships was really important to creating the kind of environment where the teams were thriving. So, some of you by now might be wondering, what is psychological safety? And if you're anyone like me, definitions don't stick in my brain. My brain is like a sieve. And I think if you want definitions, I can point you to a few books, like Amy Edmondson's The Fearless Organization, Timothy Clark's The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. Even Google have a definition, which is really long, but there's a definition. But what I would like is for us to just, do a little task together and begin to form our own impression about what psychological safety is. So if you would indulge me, and you have a card or a piece of paper and a pen, if I could ask you, you won't be writing too much, just draw a line in the middle of your card, and on one side put the initials of your psychologically unsafe person, and and on the other side, put the initials of your psychologically safe person. And if you happen to be sitting next to your, psychologically unsafe person, then just use a pseudonym or something like that. I wouldn't want you to get into trouble, but I'm sure that's not the case. And it doesn't have to be somebody who is current. It could be somebody years ago, right? And and so what I'm going to do is ask you 6 questions, and then, but I'm going to need you to rank them, both the psychologically safe and the unsafe, on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1, I'll call out some attributes in the questions. 1 means it's not really evident. The extent is substantially lower than what you would normally see, and 5 means the opposite. But I'll prompt you. So here are the questions. Question number 1 is, did this person ask for feedback from others or seek other people's feedback? So 1 is they hardly ever, and 5, they did this a lot, or they did this to a substantial extent. So if you could rank it for both the safe and the unsafe. Then question number 2 is, to what extent did they step into your shoes? 1, again, is hardly ever. 5 is they did this a lot. They found it really easy to see things from another person's perspective and to demonstrate that in the way that they communicated. Am I going too fast for you? Okay. All right, question number 3 is, to what extent did they ask people to express themselves? 1, again, is hardly ever. And then 5 is they did this a great deal. Yeah? Or they were just really good at it, whichever works for you in terms of ranking. And then question number 4 is, when they had something difficult to communicate, how did they do it? Right? 1 is that they didn't appear to give it much thought. It was like, they're just out with it, directive. Let's not use, 4-letter words, but you kind of get my drift. Thank you. And 5 is that they were really empathetic, right? They had empathy, right? So they cared about the impact on the people or the person who they were communicating with. And then 5 is, how do they respond to criticism? Yeah, and by this, I'm not talking of personal criticism, I'm talking of like feedback around ideas. So 1 is they weren't really responsive to it, didn't welcome it. 5 is they're really good at it. They, in fact, welcomed feedback. And then 6 is, to what extent did they work to bring harmony in the team? One is they didn't really notice that there were silos or that, there were factions here and that, the team wasn't really integrating. Or within, if it's on a wider scale, silos tolerated in the organization. And then 5 is that they were collaborative and inclusive in their approach, and they were proactive about that. So for some of you, if I could ask you to tally those up, and if 1 or 2 of you wouldn't mind telling me what your score is for your unsafe person and for your safe person.
You can do that.
So,
So my safe people who are sat next, they scored the maximum points that we could give.
Oh, yeah,
across the board.
yeah.
So, my unsafe people, which speaks more about me because I won't read it out, but in my unsafe list I put every other FF.
Yeah.
And they all scored 1.
1. Okay, I feel you. So 12 and below is typical for unsafe, people, while as 24, 25 upwards is, for me this is great because it sets a parameter by which we can do the next couple of things. And so because I only have 10 minutes, I would have loved to have gone into the 4 stages of psychological safety, but again, what I will do is just highlight that Timothy Clark wrote this book. This is, very much a Bible for those who really want to know more about psychological safety. And I don't know if they will get the presentation afterwards. But basically what he says is that you need a balance of respect and permission. And that to achieve the higher levels of psychological safety, you need higher levels of respect and permission. And that the first base is inclusion. People need to feel that they are part of a team and have permission to express the skills that they have. Once that inclusion safety is in place, then it's learner safety. And that is about being able to, permission to make mistakes, permission to ask questions and not people think that, oh, you're stupid or you can't do the job. And then once that is in place, the ability to contribute, i.e. some autonomy to be able to contribute without that being a career ending. But the ultimate is challenger safety, and that is, in most organizations that I've coached in, that is the trickiest bit, and this is where the magic absolutely happens. But you need a great deal of safety to operate at that level, particularly if you're challenging those in authority. So now the moment of truth. If you had the opportunity to work with your safe person and unsafe person again, where would you place them? 1 to 3 is hell would freeze over before I'd ever work with them again. And 8 to 10 is, beam me up, Scotty. I really would love to, in fact, I'd love to work on every project with this person. Okay? So my question to you is, how did they make you feel? Right? If you could just write 3 questions, 3 words for your safe and your unsafe person, and if somebody would be kind enough, or a couple of people, to volunteer without obviously revealing anything you really are not comfortable doing, that would be great. So I'll give you a minute or so to do that. Cool. I think we'll be done by then. Yeah. So, anyone who'd like to share? Go for it. Oh.
You were so enthusiastic. So on the safe side, I put equal, enough, and safe. I know that's the word that was actually that reflective.
Yeah.
And then on the unsafe side, I put nervous, anxious. I put the word less.
Less. You felt, yeah, not respected, which is, what is crucial to feel safe. Who else? Anyone else? Did I get you right? I saw some movement and I assumed.
I said for mine, sort of, are we doing both?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. So Elevated, energised and motivated for my very safe person.
Yeah.
Unsafe. Sad,
Sad.
deflated and not respected.
Which is awful, and I've been there. And one of the things that comes to mind when I think of that the motivation bit is so important. There's a theory called the self-determination theory, which is a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what that theory says is that for people to feel motivated, they need to have mastery, they need to be able to interrelate, and they need to have autonomy. And that autonomy means that they need to be respected. So what does this tell us? I mean, if we're to sum all of this up, what does this tell us in terms of, creating the kind of organizations that, where people feel able to, express their creativity? Any thoughts? To sum it up?
It's very complex. Because traditionally, I say that it's very complex, basically, because you go into an organisation and they have all the, it's legacy people and legacy managers who've been there 20 plus years, and they have all their own biases. So if you come in from this new world of being, I'm going to trust my team to be who they are and give them enough safety, etc. That in itself is a fight, right? Some managers trying to change, get them to think slightly differently or be different and trust their people. It's a hard battle. Yeah. Definitely. I've certainly seen it.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So it sounds to me like even leaders need work to help them to feel safe, to work in ways that spark that creative genius that we all want to see. Sometimes we neglect them and we blame them, but they need support to do that. So in summary, and I think I will jump straight to the end, I hope we feel that there is an interplay between psychological safety and emotional intelligence, and that interplay is what helps the communication and the collaboration to take place at the various different levels that need to happen for innovation, for creativity to happen. And as we go up that ladder of psychological safety, what we see that essentially what it is, and all those definitions that I didn't want to show you about, talk about risk, the ability to take personal risk, whether that be to learn, whether that be to contribute, whether that be to challenge. And that's essentially what psychological safety is about. But that it requires high levels of emotional awareness and regulation to create that safety. I hope we also see that it's not just leaders, as much as leaders need to lead by example and set the tone, that there's something that we can all do in our teams. And there's something that we can do as change agents, whether we're leaders or whether we're team members or whether we are Scrum Masters or coaches. Thank you very much for your time.